Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday evening, and welcome in to the Athena Alliance. My name is the Goddess of Kills, and I am going to be playing Conundrum Collection by Michael Williams, aka Serial Sensei, over at Athena Alliance. Super excited to take a look into this title and read through it and see what we can do. I love the kind of choose your own adventure vibe this has going, especially with the what path will you choose. And I went ahead and I read through the instructional guide. Super excited to jump into this and see what we can do. So this will be a lot of reading. And while I do love to read, I don't necessarily like my voice, but I hope you guys don't mind it, because I will be reading it. I figured that would be a little bit more engaging than you reading it in silence, or are we just all staring at a screen. But I'm super excited to go through this with you guys and see what Serial Sensei has created. It looks super cool just from the art that we have here. I'm loving the grayscale and everything. It's super exciting, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in for you guys, and we're going to take a look and see what the Conundrum collection has in store for us. I'm starting off with the Grimm series. There are two um, stories included when you purchase this game, if you decide to purchase it. And I'm going to start with this one, and then if we have time, then I will move over to the other one. From what I remember reading, there are multiple endings, so I'm super excited about that. So we're going to go through and see what endings we get, and see what kind of choices we have, or what kind of choices we make has on the story and how that plays out. So let's go ahead and start. I do have it kind of blown up on the screen so that it's not so hard to read for everybody, and hopefully you guys enjoy. So with that, let's jump into Grimm by Michael Williams, aka Serial Sensei. What path will you choose? Drizzling rain tap dances slowly down the window pane of an office building. On the other side of the window sit three employees: Nil, Priscilla, and Braun. While other employees enjoy the spoils of weekend festivities, they spend their Friday evening in the confines of four pale walls. Stinging Stinging their eyelids with spreadsheets and emails from the glare of their computer monitors. The framed pictures sitting underneath Neil's monitors display a loving gallery of smiling faces. His wife Miranda, along with their children Josiah and Jamie. Not Jamie. Jaime, I think is how you would say that. If I said that wrong, I apologize. Sits quietly in the back. Hey, Serial Sensei, welcome in. Please forgive me if I pronounce any of your characters' names wrong. My eyes move a lot faster than my brain, but I love to read, and I'm going to do you justice, I promise. But thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'm so excited to read your work. Neil looks past the Neil looks past the sting of his bright computer screen to give his eyes a rest from the persistent burn. His eyes drifted away to the outside parking lot. A once full parking lot during the morning now dwindled down to 5 remaining cars at 9 p.m. Unlike Braun, who was scheduled this late, Neil chose to be here against his better judgment to clock some overtime hours. A choice he often regretted. Man, I understand that. But always talked himself into making. Neil's supervisor, Priscilla, sat at the head of the room near the door. For much of the night, the tunes from her earbuds kept her awake as she combed through emails and input data across various spreadsheets. What a day. It's finally over. Well, for me it is. The weekend calls. I'll see you guys on Monday. Don't work too hard now, said Braun. By the time Neil looked up to Braun, he had already made it across the room with his hand on the doorknob of freedom. See you on Monday. Hope you have a great weekend, replied Priscilla. The subtle glides of the mouse across the pad and clicks of the keyboard keys punctuate the quiet office that now only holds Neil and Priscilla. Through the small gap in between her two monitors, Priscilla's eyes wandered over to Neil. He, he sits face forward. He sits face forward at his computer. I think that's supposed to say at his computer, ignoring the allure that gazes over his shoulder. A lightning bolt cracks from outside, sending the tap dancing rain into a frenzy. The crackling of lightning startled Neil, moving his fingers to awkwardly brush against his keyboard. He looked up to the spreadsheet on his screen that now incorrectly displayed the data he previously input. Shit, he mumbled to himself. What's wrong, Neil? Everything okay? Asked Priscilla. Priscilla perked up at her desk, eagerly awaiting Neil's answer. And our options are, yeah, I'm okay, don't worry, I'll fix it. And I messed up and I need help. Let's do, yeah, I'm okay. Don't worry, I'll fix it, said Neil. Ooh. You sure? I know I know how you are with those spreadsheets. Don't break anything over there, sir, chuckled Priscilla. Neil was competent in most areas of his job, but he admittedly struggled with some of the simpler tasks, such as troubleshooting errors within the spreadsheet program. Man, I will say one thing, Excel sucks, so I understand. Neil jogged his memory, unable to recall the solution for his issues. This left him with his tried and true method of tapping the undo button for 3 minutes straight until the spreadsheet returned to normal. I do that too. I feel you, Neil. We're buds on that one. Careful to avoid a second mishap, Neil began to input the data again. Neil and Priscilla's stint of silence was broken when a sigh from Priscilla overtook the ambient clicking of his keyboard. Why do you do this every time, Neil? You always make me chase you. You sit there tapping away and staring at the screen, but you and I both know what you'd rather be staring at, said Priscilla. Neil pushed down the lump in his throat. His eyes dribbled between a supposedly holy covenant of marriage displayed in his photos and the soft caress of the devil's temptation. Ooh, spicy. Priscilla leaned over from behind his chair. Her left hand sat underneath his chin, gently stroking his faint stubble. Priscilla pressed her face against the side of Neil's, taking a playful bite of his ear. Ooh. Cyril Sensei, what have you written, sir? Just say the word and I'll lock the door. And if you didn't know, the team down the hall left early, so it's just you. It's just can't read. And if you didn't know, the team down the hall left early, so it's just me and you. We got this whole section of the building to ourselves, so we can be as loud as you want to, she whispered. Oh boy. I feel like this is going to take like a sharp left turn, and I'm just going to be. I don't know. I'm liking it so far. I love the way it's written. The way you have written this is like very descriptive and to the point, so it's not long-winded. Wait, do I need to tap in? I'm not sure what you mean. Do you need to tap in? Okay, let's continue. Biting her bottom lip, Priscilla runs her hand up Neil's thigh and onto the bottom of his pants. Oh my god. Yes, do it. Buy it. For the past 3 months, he struggled to resist her seductive persuasions. What started as an occasional fling turned into a semi-nightly routine. She knew just the words to make him give in every time, and here he was again under her trance and temptation, only a touch away. Oh my god. So what you're telling me is Neil's he's just a bad husband. Okay, our options are lock the door. No, I can't do this anymore. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'm gonna do with. Let's do lock the door. Let's see what happens if Neil is just a bad boy. Hopefully, I don't have to read like too much. Too much, if you know what I mean. Her scent, her touch, her words. He was eager to feel it again. Neil instructed Priscilla to lock the door. His eyes undressed her from behind as she urgently followed his instructions. She turned back to Neil, teasing him as she removed each article of clothing. Now, in just a bra, she stood over him from the chair. Priscilla placed her hand on his waistline, unzipping his pants. Oh boy, everybody strap in. I don't go too crazy. I paint the picture, but not too. Perfect. Perfect. Don't worry. I'll do all the work this time. All you have to do is enjoy, she said. Also, not a voice actor, so, I'm just reading. So don't ding me for that. The two exchanged devilish grins. Priscilla's sultry instructional tone triggered urges he found impossible to contain. Neil freed himself of all inhibitions, giving in to the carnal urges he could no longer suppress. He squeezed her tightly, embracing her warmth. Though through the strands of hair hanging over her eyes, Priscilla looked over Neil's shoulder to Miranda's photo. It drew a grin from her as she straddled him, bouncing relentlessly until his emphatic release. No, you're good. Wait, I need the sultry tone. Oh, I can't do a sultry tone. The best you're gonna get out of me is like hillbilly and whatever my normal tone is. Neil's head lies buried in between her breasts, his arms wrapped around her torso, squeezing tightly. In between deep breaths, Priscilla smiled as she looked down at him. Neil looked into her gaze. His eyes were lost in wondrous confusion. For a moment his head dropped downward. With her index finger placed underneath his chin, Priscilla lifted him back up. You always have that look when we finish, like you're ashamed of yourself. It's okay. You want it. I want it. So we can have it. As long as you want to. And I'll never tell anybody. I promise. But I've got to go now. So you can get home to that family of yours, said Priscilla. She rose to her feet, gathering her belongings and dressing back in her clothes. Neil buttoned his pants and straightened his clothes the best he could. His eyes continued to trace over Priscilla as she slipped back into her jeans. Priscilla reached down into her purse, pulling out a black plastic bag that she tossed to Neil. You know the drill. Make sure you close shop and shut everything down before you leave. You can clean yourself up with what's in the bag. Nobody else is here and the cleaning crew already left, so the bathroom should be empty. Good night, Neil. I'll see you on Monday, said Priscilla. You're screaming? Priscilla was too. I'm sorry. I'll get serious. This is really well written. I like this. Priscilla closed the door behind her, leaving Neil to sit underneath the weight of a heavy silence. The thudding sound of rain against the windows couldn't drown out the guilty echoes inside his head. Neil shut down his computer. Sure to clean after himself, he ran disinfectant wipes up and down the desk, keyboards, and monitor screens, finishing off the room with a spray of floral air freshener. Closing the door behind him, Neil headed to the bathroom with the plastic bag Priscilla had given him. He cleaned himself off and tidied up his appearance in the bathroom mirror, but his cleanliness couldn't fight the feelings of repulsion he saw in his reflection. Nothing could wipe away the dirt of his soul or the foul smell of lies he would soon tell again when he returned home. Yeah, you should feel bad, Neil, you asshole. He now found himself in the empty parking lot with rain beating down against his head. The downpour didn't motivate him to move any faster. He tucked his head down in between his shoulders, tossing the black plastic bag into the trash can. Neil's blue sedan was the last remaining car in the lot. He hopped into his car. Jesus, excuse me, guys. He hopped in his car to the sound of FM sports talk radio. The hot takes spewing from the show host weren't enough to quiet the voices in his head that continued to wrestle with. He allowed himself to sit with those thoughts as he peeled off into the city streets. If it's raining, you probably shouldn't be peeling off anywhere, but to each their own. Traffic was typically moderate during this time, but the heavy downpour left the streets less crowded than normal this Friday night. Streams of dialogue flowed through Neil's head in anticipation of conversations he'd foreseen in his near future. These conversations wouldn't be simple disagreements, but potentially life-altering revelations. He traveled down every path and possibility, all winding down the road of inevitable disaster. And he would have no one to blame but himself. The faint sound of a guitar crept its way into Neil's thoughts. The pluck of the strings played a familiar tune. But in his current mental state, it took a moment for its familiarity to register. My phone, Neil said to himself. The sound of the ringtone riffed louder as Neil snapped back to reality from his mental lapse. He pulled the phone from his pocket, fumbling it down inside of his cup holder. Looking down, he reached to recover it. A blaring horn drew his eyes back to the road where he was blinded by headlights and the grill of an 18-wheeler. Neil's last second swerve wouldn't be enough to dodge fate. The thundering roar of a colliding metal cracked through the sky. Wow. Neil closed his eyes as his body viciously jerked back and forth. Tire screeches and sequences of colliding metal boomed through his ears. He felt himself launch from the vehicle, and then he opened his eyes. From his vantage point, Neil looked downward. The rain obscured his vision, but through it he could see a barrage of blue and red flashing lights. The horrific sounds that pierced his ears cut to silence. The cars, the bodies below, everything except him ceased to move. Neil raised his hands toward his face, rotating his palms in awe of their newfound transparency. What the hell? He said to himself. He reached his hand out to the rain, pushing each individual droplet to the side, bringing the wreckage into clear view. A pile of dented and shredded vehicles across all lanes of the street lay in the wake of the accident. Neil spotted his blue sedan among the wreckage. It was spun backwards near a light pole, and the front end folded into itself. Straining his body, Neil tried to move forward toward the accident when an unknown force yanked him upward. The rapid ascension pulled him into the high winds that beat against his face. He reached the Earth's stratosphere, becoming engulfed in an unforgiving heat. Neil screamed as loud as his lungs would allow, and then it stopped. Again, Neil's eyes opened. Bringing his palms to view, he rotated them back and forth. He was transparent no more. His body had returned to its normal state. Ahead of him, above and below in all directions, was an infinite stretch of white. What is this place? Neil asked aloud. Oh, this place? It's nothing special. Quite boring, really, but welcome. You've reached the infinite void. Boy, did I get you here right on time. 1 second later, and that could have been really ugly, replied a voice from beyond. The voice spoke crisp and precisely. It was humorous with an ominous hiss in its undertone. Neil turned. Neil turned to see a young. Oh, wow. Neil turned to see a man sitting at a table with an empty chair on the other side. He was bald with deathly pale skin to match his white suit and shoes. Placed in front of him was a manila folder, 2 cups, and a small silver teapot. Got me here. So you're the one who pulled me out? Asked Neil. Yes, I pulled you out, Mr. Neil. What is it? Berkman? Yes, I pulled you out so we could have a little talk. Come sit, get comfortable. I've even got tea, the man replied. Ooh, tea. Weary of the man's presence, Neil carefully approached the table. Each footstep forward echoed throughout the void. The man took a sip from his cup, smiling as Neil took his seat. So you know me, but I have no clue who or what you are, Mr. Grimm. My name is Grimm. Though who I am honestly isn't much important. I'm one of the many who performs spiritual clerical duties, we'll call it. Grimm. You mean the Reaper? Oh, we've got a sharp one here. I like it. Listen, Grimm, was it? I don't know if I'm comfortable dealing with somebody like you. Just doesn't seem like a good idea. No offense. Oh, really? Who would you be more comfortable taking on an 18-wheeler in that little sedan of yours? I mean, if you want, I can let you go back to doing that and you can let me know how it turns out. Neil pauses for a moment. Grimm smirks at him, keeping direct eye contact. Unable to accept the truth, Neil shakes his head. No in rebellion. What a joke. This probably isn't even real. It's got to be a dream or something, said Neil. Oh, I assure you this is real, Neil, as I am not in the business of selling dreams. But if you insist that this is infinite void and I are just figments of your imagination, then wake up, replied Grimm. Grimm takes another sip of his tea. Neil grits his teeth and continually blinks his eyes. The vain attempts to wake up draw a laugh from Grimm, who observes in amusement. Oh, he tries and he tries to defy reality. Humans in denial. What a pair, said Grimm. Not all the tea is great. That's what I was thinking. Seeing that his strain led to only laughter from Grimm, Neil settled into acceptance of the situation. Fine, I'll humor you. What exactly am I here for? He asked. I'll tell you, but please have some tea first. The tea's gotta be good. I went through the trouble of making it. The least you could do is take a sip or two, replied Grim. Neil reluctantly took a sip of the tea. Vanilla, chamomile, and a hint of honey hit him in a surprise pleasantry. He continued to enjoy the tea while keeping his eyes on Grim's every motion. You know the funny thing about life, Mr. Berkman? It's not as complicated as humans really make it out to be. Sure, it'll hit you with an unexpected curveball every now and then, but all life is a series of decisions, and every choice provides you with an outcome directly related to that decision. Funny enough, choosing not to make a decision is still in fact a decision, whether you know it or not. Neil, you're here because you made a decision, a series of decisions really, which will for sure have some interesting outcomes. And to say that they were bad decisions would be quite an understatement. Bad decisions? What could I have possibly done that could lead me to a place like this, sitting across from a person like you? Now, Neil, I just called you sharp a minute ago. Please don't make me rescind my compliment. He too aggressive for me about this tea. It sounded like good tea, vanilla and chamomile and honey. I mean, that's got to be good, right? Neil stood firm in his convictions, not budging on the thought of his character being in question. Grim's face frowned sour as he leaned forward, sucking his teeth. Damn it, Neil. Why are you doing this? You think God is the only one who can see what you're doing all the time? You hate being in the office late, especially on Fridays, because who wants to delay the weekend when you've got a beautiful family to go home to? At least that's how you used to feel. But these last few Fridays, you've been a little different, haven't they? Priscilla, was it? Your supervisor? Oh, you both put in quite the overtime tonight. Ha ha! Jokes. A fiery one she is. You've been wrapped around her finger like a dog longing for its next treat. I don't think your wife Miranda would approve. But what she doesn't know won't hurt, I guess. Time sure does fly by when you're having fun, doesn't it, Neil? One minute you're hunching in a steamy office affair, and next thing you know you're running headfirst into 18-wheelers on the way back home. Life sure does happen fast. Taken aback by Grim's delivery, Neil takes a deep breath to collect his thoughts. Okay, listen, you're right. I made a choice. One I'm not too proud of. But I love my wife. I love my family. I promise I do. I just had a moment. But I love my family. I need my family. It did sound good, but I don't trust. You think it's like a truth serum or something? You can't poison him, can he? He's already dead in limbo, hanging out in the in between. Oh, poor Neil. Listen, you don't have to convince me that you're a family man. To be honest, whether you go home to them or not doesn't much affect me at all. But this isn't about me, Neil. This is about you, and the next choice that you'll get to make, as this choice might be the most important of them all. Grim slides the manila folder over to Neil. Neil opens it, revealing two pieces of paper inside. What are these? Neil asks Neil. Those, Mr. Berkman, are contracts, ultimatums, deals, or choices as I'd like to call them. Contracts, a literal deal with death. This might as well be a deal with the devil. Not quite. Believe me, he's far worse than I. His contracts would be much more stringent. Listen, Neil. I spend all day collecting and dealing with souls, but my job is not to judge them or to pick sides. I simply collect them. Then give them a chance to possibly alter their fates, and based on their decision, the chips fall where they may. All of this talk about choices, decisions, outcomes, and souls, what do you really get out of all this? Is it just entertainment? Something to keep you laughing while you sit in this infinite void mumbling to yourself? Entertainment? Sure. It's always a good time because humans are so interesting. But I don't like to do this because I want to. It's a job, just like you have. Balance is needed in the universe and in the afterlife, Neil. I merely offer the chosen a choice. To see what color hue their soul glows, and I make note of it, and depending on that note we figure out which of the two homes in the afterlife that we most likely need to make the proper reservations for. You make yourself sound so important. I'll be honest, for the Grim Reaper you look so basic. More pale than I'd imagined. You say you collect souls, but it feels like you're a glorified afterlife customer service agent. That's a tough life to live. Oh Lord, probably shouldn't say that to the Grim Reaper. Well, I'm assuming this is the Grim Reaper. Neil's insult triggered a hearty laugh from Grim. At the tail end of his laughter, Grim's voice transitioned to a sinister tone. His laughter punched with a heavy bass. Its smoky and grave darkness uncomfortably echoed throughout the void. He leaned forward, with his face sitting inches away from Neil's. Now that is hilarious. Just so you know, this form is just for my appearance in the void. If your little human eyes saw my real face, my real body, you'd shit yourself uncontrollably. Also, need I remind you, depending on how your time is spent on Earth, you could end up in the same seat as I am. No heaven, no hell, only eternal work. This job requires a ton of manpower, and we are always hiring. Now let's get to the matter at hand. Grimm's hellish resonance left Neil frozen. The deep bass in his voice reverberated through his ears, sending a paralyzing chill down his body. Neil opened his mouth to speak, stuttering. The words tiptoed out of his mouth. "All right, Grim, what exactly are my choices?" he asked. Grim leaned back in his chair, reverting to his normal posture and voice. He folded his hands and smiled. "Yes, your choices. It's time for the fun part. I thought you would never ask," Grim replied. Oh boy, so now we have a series of choices. Contract A, contract B. I'm ready to choose. I assume we get to read the contracts if we click on them. You can read them before you choose. That's what I was thinking, so I was going to do that. Let's read Contract A. Contract A. Signing Contract A will ensure that you won't die from the accident, but you will live the remainder of your days paralyzed and bound to a wheelchair. This may sound cruel, but all things considered, you still get to leave with your life, and what's more valuable than that, Grim explained. Ooh. Okay. Yes, your choices. It's time for... Okay, read that already. If you sign Contract B, you'll dodge the 18-wheeler entirely and leave the scene without a scratch, but at the end of your life, whenever that happens, you will forfeit your right to enter through those pearly gates of heaven. No passing go or collecting 200. It's straight to hell for you, Mr. Berkman. So, no matter how good you are on Earth for the rest of your days, when it's all over, you'll get to see me again, and I'll take you to the classroom where all the bad kids play. I can't help you once you get in there, though, Grim explained. Ooh. What if I choose neither? Asked Neil. As I said earlier, not choosing is still in fact a choice. For entertainment purposes, I'll be slightly disappointed, but you are well within your right to make that decision. In that case, I'll transport you back to your body right before I yank you from the wreckage, and whatever happens, happens. Grim slides Neil a silver pen from inside his shirt pocket. Neil taps the pen against the table, carefully examining the contracts. The language in each is written plainly, with no ways to misconstrue their details. There were no hidden motives or underhanded tricks at play. Just a reminder, Mr. Berkman, there is no right or wrong choice here. Just like any other choice you would make in life. Do what you think is best. I won't sway you in any direction. All I ask is that you consider your choices carefully. I'm ready to choose. Neil pondered his fate. The pendulum of his life swung to and fro between these contracts, a bind to be forever sealed with the ink of his signature, or he could choose to walk away and let life happen as it may. He was ready to bear the responsibility of each outcome, and so he made his choice. Ooh. I think I know what I want to choose, but I don't know. I want to see what happens if I choose neither. Because I read your instructions. I know there's multiple endings, but I want to see what happens if I do this one, which is still a choice, right? So I'm going to choose this one. Neil places the documents and the pen back inside the manila folder and sliding them back to Grim. I appreciate your offer, but I'm not playing this game, Grim. I'll roll the dice and let life run its course. Like you said earlier, the chips will fall as they may. A bold choice. You're practically going back to stare death in the face and see who blinks first. You've got balls, Mr. Berkman. Whether or not it's foolish or brave, I guess we'll find out. But I respect it. Grim takes the last sip of his tea and gathers the contracts back inside the manila folder. Well, Neil, I'd love to sit and chat more, but I've got a pretty booked day. So I'll be seeing you around. I hope you have a long and fruitful life, Mr. Berkman, until we meet again. Wait, how do I get back? Grim snaps his finger as the void flashes into a blinding white. Descending from the stratosphere, Neil returned to his astral form in a free fall. He could only watch as he was guided back to the world below. The beating whips of wind blew against his ears as he as continued his descent below the clouds. In a matter of seconds, he returned to the scene of the accident moments before the crash was set to happen. Looking down, he could see himself in his blue sedan, fumbling his phone. On the other side of the road, moving full steam ahead, was an 18-wheeler, set on a course collision that would forever change his life. Neil pushed away the droplets of rain as his astral form merged back with his body. The merger sent a rippling shock down Neil's spine, bringing his attention back to the road. After regaining control of his body, Neil was blinded by the incoming headlights. There was no time to swerve or dodge the inevitable. The violent metallic crunch of the collision roared through the area as the accident unfolded. Neil felt his body jerk back and forth after being hit by the truck and the vehicle behind him. His head slammed against the airbag, which wasn't enough to keep him from being knocked unconscious. He awakened in the back of an ambulance truck. The voices above cautioned him not to move. With each inhale, he felt a throbbing pain in his ribs that traveled through his entire midsection. Every turn and bump on the road from the ambulance drew a grunt from Neil as he could feel his body pushing against the sides of the stretcher bed. The ambulance stopped and Neil was rolled out into the emergency room. He looked up to see Miranda walking beside the two paramedics who wheeled him in. Desperately, he longed to call her name, but the pain wouldn't allow it. They rolled Neil into a nearby room where he was placed on a ventilator. The panicky voices of the nurses and doctors hovering above his head were turning into slow, muddy, inaudible words. Neil struggled to breathe, clinging tightly to his last moments of life. Ooh, oh boy. The numbing cold touch of death rose from the tips of his toes to the top of his head. Life slipped from his hands as the sound of a flat line rung throughout the room. Neil's perspective shifted as he found himself floating above the room, looking down at his lifeless body. He watched the doctors frantically move about, trying to resuscitate him back to life. Miranda broke out in an uncontrollable scream, swirling around the noise of the doctors and nurses who yelled instructions back and forth to each other. No tool or medical procedure could save Neil from his fate. The flatline would remain and the room fell in silence. Neil Berkman was officially deceased. Okay, R.L. Steinish. Weird, isn't it? Seeing yourself pass to the other side. Well, up you go, Mr. Berkman, said Grim. The ominous hiss of Grim's voice surrounded Neil, though he couldn't physically see him. As it was before, Neil's astral projection was yanked upward through the skies, reaching the stratosphere in seconds. Neil opened his eyes to a small, tidy office room. Inside of the room was a small plush couch that sat in front of a wall-mounted television. At the front of the office behind the desk was Grim. He took a sip of tea before looking up at Neil. Life sure does happen fast. I feel like I just saw you, Neil, grinned Grim. You're the last person I was hoping to see, so I guess this means I'm dead? Yes, you're officially dead now. Thank you for the follow. The sippy, appreciate you being here. You're the last person I was hoping to see, so I guess that means I'm dead. Yes, you're officially dead now. Where am I? This isn't the void, is it? Asked Neil. Nope. You've graduated from that place. Think of this as your own personal waiting room. Waiting room? What am I waiting for? Under normal circumstances, you'd be waiting to be judged. You kind of still are, but your situation is a little different than most. How so? Remember during our first meeting I told you that I am one of the many who collect souls and that we're always hiring? Well, let's just say we have a vacancy to be filled and you're a potential candidate for the position. What makes me so special for the job? I'm not sure. The decision wasn't mine to make, but if I had to guess, I say that the duality of your life made the hue of your soul glow a peculiar color. One that might not be good enough to pass through the pearly gates, but not bad enough to burn in the eternity either. It's almost like they're testing you to see if you'll bet on yourself or join the ranks of the Soul Reapers. What do you think I should do? You know the drill, Neil. What I think means nothing. I only collect souls, but I am no judge or authority in what happens to them. I am here to offer one final choice at the request of my superiors. I won't influence you either way. What option you decide bothers me none. Okay, hit me. What are the choices? The choices are simple. Option A, option B. Alright, let's read option A. Option A. If you go with choice A, your soul will be judged according to how you've lived your life up to this point. Simply put, if the good outweighs the bad, then you can pass through the pearly gates, but if it doesn't, then it's straight into the fire with you. An eternal burn that doesn't let up, and there's zero chance of redemption or relief. Oh boy. Option B. If you go with option B, you will become a Grim Reaper. For an eternity, you will collect souls, present tests of judgment, and guide deceased spirits into the afterlife. Your true body will be given a new form and not so pleasant one as you might imagine. You'll never see heaven, but you won't see hell either. You'll spend an eternity in servitude, ensuring that the afterlife maintains order and balance as it needs to. Your entire existence will be nothing but work. God, that last sentence just sounds ugh. Let me save real quick so I don't lose anything. I think I'm ready to choose. Alright, Mr. Berkman, for the final time, what choice will you make? I'm going to become a Grim Reaper. That ain't it, Chief. That's not the vibe. I guess you were right when you said I might end up on the same side of the table as you. Seeing you for an eternity sounds like torture. But it's one step down from possible real hell. Become a Grim Reaper it is, said Neil. Ha! What a day this has turned out to be. Not willing to take a gamble on that shitty soul of yours? I understand completely. Welcome aboard, Mr. Berkman. Come follow me. Now we gotta go talk to HR. Grim led Neil out of the room into the hallway. Signs above the clear marble floors ahead pointing towards the reception area. Grim walked down the opposite side of the hallway to where the signs pointed. The lights above dimmed in increments the further they walked down the hallway. Grim stood at the side of a black door with a faint shimmer of light shining down from above it. He motioned for Neil to walk inside. Neil stepped through the door. On each side of the four walls stood figures dressed in all white. They shared the pale skin of Grim, each with a hint of sinister tracing along their faces. They stood quietly as Grim followed in behind Neil. Before Neil was a black, circular table with an open book on top of it. The left page of the book contained text written in an unknown language. The right page of the book was indexed with the shape of a hand imprinted on it. A standing black mirror stood on the other side of the table. Neil stared into the mirror, but it didn't return his reflection. Grim stood to the side of the table, motioning Neil to take a seat. Are we about to go into like Grim Reaper custom character customization for him? I don't know why I said that sentence like that. Surrounding you are the 5 head Grim Reapers. We are entrusted with our armies to collect souls from different parts of the earth. You will obey us as we obey our superiors. To go against us is to challenge their supreme authority. And to challenge their authority will condemn you to a damnation of no return. Thus the reason for this vacancy. Oh Lord. We 5 are here to bear witness to your oath to fulfill your duties assigned. You will perform no less and no more of what you are told, thus ensuring the balance and flow of the afterlife. You will place your hand in the book to complete this oath, said Grim. Yes, all the Grim Reaper options. Neil looked around the room into emotionless eyes staring back at him. They remained silent, awaiting his move. He pressed his hand down onto the indentation of the page. An ungodly level of heat scorched his palm, sending smoke throughout the room. Neil screamed as an unforeseen force kept his palm glued to the page. The heat spread from his fingertips into every inch of his body. Flashes of his life played before his eyes, cycling into vivid loops. the smoke The smoke whisked through the room before completely disappearing. Neil struggled to breathe as he regained his composure. The palm of his hand was pale white, as was the rest of his arm. Through his grunting, Neil caught a look of himself in the mirror. His skin was covered in a deathly pale tint. He wore a crisp white suit similar to that of Grimm's with silver cufflinks. The pale face reflection before him glitched into an image of a skeletal figure with a black and red cloak. Swarms of insects crawled along the figure's eyelids and lower mouth. Neil yelled at the image, cursing aloud before covering his mouth. The tone of his voice deepened into a smoky, gravely timbre. The skeletal image cut in and out of the mirror before fading to black again. Grimm chuckled at Neil's moment of hysteria. What you saw was the real you, Neil. That's who you really are. Now you see why we've been assigned these clean white suits. They're a little easier on the eyes when we talk to our clients. Now come, Neil. The afterlife is a very busy place. You've got work to do. Congratulations, you've reached the true ending of this story. There are 3 additional endings to reach if you choose to revisit the void for an alternate path or make a different choice once you've reached the afterlife. Thank you for reading. I'm going to go back and look at the other options, but that was a good read. Let's go see what the other options are. I'm only going to start reading again once I get to new options. So, I think I did this one first. And then we did this. We locked the door. I'm going to go back to the contracts and I'm going to start from there. Ba, ba, ba. So I chose what if I don't choose, right? So I'm going to go back to, so contract B is 2018 whether so far everybody's gotten the true ending on the first try. Enderdasting. There's nothing wrong with that though. It's very well written and very well put into it puts a very clear mental image into your head of what's happening. If you sign this contract, you will leave. It seems without a scratch, but at the end of your life, whatever happens, you'll fulfill the right. Okay, I'm gonna do contract B and see what happens. Neil signs his signature across the bottom of contract B. Ha. And after all your slander and indignation, belittling me to a customer service agent, you sign contract B. You know, Neil, I don't look forward to many things in my line of work, but seeing you again will surely be one of them, chuckled Grimm. The feeling isn't mutual. Just get me out of harm's way like you promised. I need to go home to my family in one piece, Neil replied. I'm no liar, Neil. The truck will do you no harm. You have my word. That sounds like the truck will do you no harm, but you're gonna, like, drive off an edge of a cliff. Or something. I don't know. Grimm takes the last sip of his tea and gathers the contracts back inside the manila folder. Well, Neil, I'd love to sit and chat more, but I've got a pretty booked day, so I'll be seeing you around. Though it will ultimately end in a fiery blaze, I hope you live long and fruitful life, Mr. Berkman, until we meet again. Wait, how do I go back? Grimm snaps his finger and the void flashes in a blinding white. Descending from the stratosphere, Neil returned to his astral form in a free fall. Neil could only watch as he was guided back to the world below, falling beneath the clouds. In a matter of seconds, he returned to the scene of the accident seconds before the crash was set to happen. Looking down, he could see himself in his blue sedan, fumbling his phone. On the side of the road, moving full steam ahead, was an 18-wheeler set on a collision course that would forever change his life. Neil pushed away the droplets of rain as his astral form merged with his body. The merger sent a rippling shock down Neil's spine, bringing his attention back to the road. Seconds from a catastrophe, car miraculously swerved away from the oncoming truck. A metallic slaughter unfolded behind him as the truck collided with another vehicle, triggering the string of events. Neil mashed on his brakes inches before slamming into a light pole. From the rearview mirror, he caught glimpses of the truck and vehicular debris spread across the street. Neil exited his car, looking face to face at the wreckage before him. The truck demolished all in its path, causing a 5-vehicle crash that decimated the front of the SUV behind him. Shattered glass and heavily dented frames could be seen on every vehicle impacted by the collision. Those who attempted to swerve away from the demolition collided with each other, further adding to the potential casualties. I promise I can read, guys. It's just my eyes move faster than my brain. Neil approached the totaled SUV. An elderly man leaned slumped over in the driver's seat. "Sir, are you okay?" asked Neil. The man responded with a groan, coughing up a thin stream of blood. He was unable to move, but opened his eyes when he noticed Neil. "Listen, don't move. I'm going to call 911, assured Neil. Neil relayed the location of the accident and status of those involved that he could see to the emergency dispatcher. Onlookers from surrounding local businesses made their way to the streets, gasping at its horrors. Neil panned through the crash until he spotted a familiar vehicle. Ooh, I think I know where this is going. So you don't get sent to Cyril, just letting you know, Dakota_J is here. Neil panned through the crash until he spotted a familiar vehicle. "Oh my God," he said aloud. His panic carried him over to an ocean blue van. The front window was cracked beyond repair, the hood pushed backward, revealing the parts underneath, and the driver's side window was completely shattered. A woman sat lifeless in the front seat with her head leaning down. Blood trickled from her cheeks caused by the shattered glass debris that stuck to her face. "No, no, no, no," cried Neil. Neil unbuckled the seat belt, carrying the woman's body to the ground. He swiped the blood and shards of glass from his wife's face. Miranda's eyes were shut, her face emotionless. "You gotta wake up, Miranda, you gotta wake up," Neil pleaded. Neil squeezed her body tight, clinging to a fate he couldn't accept. Police sirens blared over Neil's shoulder, drowning his uncontrollable tears. Paramedics and police officers rushed to the scene, aiding all of those in need and sealing off the area. A scream from the depths of his stomach cried out as he watched the paramedics wheel Miranda's body away. Police officers approached Neil to gather information about how the accident happened. He cooperated to the best of his abilities, but often his sentences stopped at dead ends, punctuated by tears. The police blocked off the street and returned the flow of traffic as the debris and damaged vehicles were removed. Plodding through the rainy concrete, Neil watched as the other survivors were given medical assistance for their wounds. Those who witnessed the accident unfold from the beginning offered condolences as he walked by. BRB. Alright, we'll be here. We'll be here. As promised, Neil left the horrific scene physically unscathed. He returned to his car, paralyzed in grief as to what he had witnessed. Each replay of the accident in his head hit like a shot to the stomach. The anguish would persist as Neil thought of how he would break the news to his children as well as his mother-in-law, Audrey. Audrey's voice cracked through the phone at the sound of the news. She allowed her tears to pass before shifting her focus to the children. Audrey agreed to meet Neil back at his house to support him in breaking the news to Josiah and Jaime. Audrey was already sitting on the doorstep when Neil pulled into the driveway. Carrying unbearable weights, the two consoled each other to gather the strength needed to walk through the front door. Josiah and Jaime were sitting on the couch, cycling through television channels as they walked in. Neil instructed them to cut the television off and took a seat between the two with Audrey sitting next to Jaime. Neil spared the children the specific details to soften the blow. But the pain but the pain hurt all the same regardless of delivery. He never used the word dead in his explanation, opting to frame the situation as Mommy won't be coming home anymore. The family would gather the following week for Miranda's funeral. Audrey preached of her daughter's unwavering commitment to her family as a testament of her character and dedication to those she loved. Neil held his children next to him, hiding his eyes behind a pair of black shades. He returned the condolences with soft-spoken words and splintered sentences. When they returned home from the funeral, Audrey agreed to take the children in for the weekend. Even while mourning the loss of her daughter, she wanted to plan out some fun time for the children so they wouldn't be consumed by depression. This would also give Neil time alone to process his feelings and actions that ultimately led to this point. Neil sat in the bedroom that he and Miranda once shared, sorting through her belongings. He had grown accustomed to waking up to the noise from the children or Miranda. Now he sat in an uncanny silence, a void that could never be replaced. After sorting through her miscellaneous items, he took a seat at her desk where she often worked on her laptop. It was still plugged in and open from the last time she used it. Neil never logged into Miranda's laptop, but they shared passwords on other devices, so getting past the lock screen only took a few guesses. Miranda's home screen picture was a sunlit beach photo that they took on their honeymoon 7 years ago. Neil browsed through her folder of photos taken further trips down memory lane, reliving all the moments they shared during the years together. He backed out of the home screen that was littered with dozens of folders and files scattered about, but one folder that was placed all the way to the right of the screen by itself caught his eye. Neil clicked into the unnamed folder, which contained a series of images and videos. Thumbnails of each image carried an unsettling familiarity to them. The first image he clicked dated back 2 months ago. It showed him and Priscilla leaving the office together. Ooh, he's been caught. Oh my god. She knew the whole time. It showed him and Priscilla leaving the office together after a night shift. Her hair was still frizzled from their encounter. In the beginning stages of their office flings, Neil and Priscilla were reckless about their appearance. They figured it didn't matter much because often they were the only two left in the building aside from the security guard at the front desk who never asked any questions. The preceding pictures all showed Neil and Priscilla leaving the office together. The photos were also time-stamped, detailing what they would always leave minutes apart from each other. Neil's stomach turned as he scrolled down to a video of what was the last file on the folder. The camera perspective showed the front angle of the building from afar. After a moment, the camera zoomed in and focused on Priscilla leaving through the front door. 2 minutes later appeared Neil, who was holding the black bag that Priscilla would always give him. He tossed it in the trash can before leaving. "Let's go look," said Miranda in the video. The camera shook as she slammed her car door. The closer and closer she walked until she stood over the top of the trash can. Wearing a glove, Miranda reached in and retrieved the bag. She shuffled around the items, noticeably finding a wash rag and a used condom. Ugh, yuck. "What a piece of shit," said Miranda. Neil slammed the laptop shut, cursing to himself. His cell phone buzzed from a text message sent from Audrey asking if he was doing okay. When he looked at his phone, Neil noticed that there were multiple unread text messages from Miranda that were sent minutes before the fatal accident. He opened the text thread, which contained all the pictures that were inside the folder from her laptop. In addition to the pictures was a final text message. "Hey Neil, you probably don't even notice it, but I'm following you right now. I know about you and Priscilla. I came out tonight and texted you just to see if you would lie about it. We'll be having a talk when we get home." "Shit," Neil screamed to himself. He flung the phone across the room, striking it against the wall. The weight of the reality fell on his shoulders, sinking him down into the chair. Miranda had known of his infidelities with Priscilla, but never lived to confront him about it. The hardest pill to swallow lay in the fact that his actions inadvertently were a catalyst for the most devastating loss he could ever imagine. There would be no chance for personal retribution, apologizing, or atonement. He could only soak in the waters of iniquity and pray that they wouldn't drown him over time. When Neil looked into the eyes of his children and Audrey, he could see the unfilled void from Miranda's loss staring back at him. It was an empty but heavy look. He juggled around the idea of confessing his wrongdoings, but the contract he chose sealed his fate. Honestly, honesty would bring him no reward, and the contents would bring closure felt like a box best left closed in his estimation. No matter what he chose to do, hell would still ultimately be his final stop. With this outlook, Neil decided he would live the rest of his life doing as he pleased. Protecting his children from his nefarious deeds was his only commitment, and so he did his best to not let them witness his compromising acts. All other life obligations would be merely optional if he felt like doing the right thing. During the times when Audrey would take the kids out, Neil went straight to his phone to text Priscilla. Desperate for her touch, Neil persisted that she come to his house to visit him. Priscilla rejected the idea, wanting to keep their fling strictly an office activity. But with Miranda gone, Neil was able to convince Priscilla to exercise a new level of recklessness. Picking up where they had left off in the office, the two would continue their sessions in the bed Neil once shared with his wife. Wow, Neil, you suck. Priscilla happily participated in Neil's sexcapades, but would eventually grow tired of being entangled in his web. She closely observed his behavior, which became more unhinged over time. Alcohol turned into his personal healing potion that he excessively consumed. Priscilla's attempts to caution him against drinking were ignored and pushed to the side. The alcoholism brought about inconsistent mood swings that took the fun out of the flings for Priscilla, who eventually stopped seeing Neil altogether. This new dynamic spilled into the office, souring their work relationship. This would lead to Priscilla leaving the company altogether and excommunicating Neil from her life. Priscilla wouldn't be the only one to notice Neil's downward spiral. Josiah and Jaime took note of their father's change in behavior. Unsure of how to get through to him, they called their grandmother Audrey for help. After an outing with the kids on a Sunday afternoon, they sat down Neil in the living room for an intervention. Neil's clothes were clean and pressed that day so as to keep up appearances, but his heavily red-tinted eyes showed how much he was struggling to hold his life together. A man on a downward spiral. The concern of his children pinched him, bringing him back to the reality of just for a moment. They insisted that he needed to be better, and they were willing to help. The children in specific emphasized that Miranda would have hated to see him in such a dismal fashion. He continued to clutch his secret of infidelity close to his chest. Neil doled out promises of change and betterment to the family. Following up his promises, he enrolled into a rehab facility to prove he intended to course correct his actions. But his vain pledges led to more of the same. As he never followed up past his first rehab appointment, his rehab meetings were scheduled after his evening work shifts. Audrey set up an arrangement so that she would watch Josiah and Jaime on the days he needed to attend his sessions. Neil would use this free time to aimlessly drive around the city, often finding bars to attend and further douse himself in libations. Addiction is a hard thing to break. My cat's laying on top of my computer. You can probably see her tail. During one alcohol-fueled evening, Neil sat in his car in the parking lot of a bar. The light pole above shined on the front window, showing his dreary eyes and a head struggling to stay upright. Neil was several drinks past being buzzed, but convinced himself that he could make the 20-minute drive home. Oh, are we about to, come full circle? Neil exited the bar parking lot into the bumper-to-bumper streets of downtown. The stop-and-go traffic annoyed him as he found himself repeatedly stuck at red lights, unable to move at a consistent speed. Annoyed with the traffic, Neil made a right turn, driving down a few blocks until he reached a highway exit. With the freedom to push the pedal, Neil sped into the merging lane. His foot hammered onto the gas, but the effects of the alcohol impaired his reaction timing and alertness to his surroundings. Without checking his blind spots, he launched himself into traffic. As he merged, the front of his sedan swiped the rear end of a pickup truck. He continued to drift to the furthest left lane, slamming into the highway wall barrier. The cars behind him swerved outward, attempting to dodge him, leading to more wreckage as the vehicles slammed into each other's rear ends. Neil looked up through his rearview mirror, seeing the only bright lights before his car violently shook from a rear-end collision. Car horns and the booming metallic crashes sounded off in the cracking sequence, lasting just a few seconds before Neil faded to black. Neil opened his eyes to the blurred outlines of figures running in and out of a room. He could feel something attached to his arm, but his body was too weak to turn and look at it. He shuddered from the cold that traveled upward from the tips of his toes. Outlined in white, Neil saw a figure walk through the doors of the room. Those in the room were oblivious to this figure, as if they couldn't see it. He could feel its darkness and ominous presence approach. It leaned down toward him, whispering into his ear. "Didn't think I'd see you again so early, Neil. With the way your life turned out, you would have been better off in the void with me. Never mind that now. It's time to go where the bad kids play. Hope you enjoyed that cold feel of death. Because where you're going, that's the last cold thing you'll ever feel." Ending B. Congratulations, you've reached one of the final endings, but there are more options to be explored. Return to the void and pick a different path next time. You just might reach another branch of the story. I think I like this ending more than I did the true ending. But we're going to go back and see what we get with option A, or contract A, rather. This is very well written and very detailed. I'm really, really enjoying it. My only gripe, and that has nothing to do with how Serial Sensei wrote this, is I don't like reading on electronic devices. It bothers my eyes. Like, I can't do Kindle, phone, nothing like that. But I am really, really enjoying this. This is so good. So we're going to go back to where we pick the contracts again, and then I'll start reading again from contract A. So I'm going to do this. We did this option. Excuse me. And then I think contract A. Signing this contract will ensure that you won't die from the accident, but you will live the remainder of your days paralyzed and bound to a wheelchair. This may sound cruel, but all things considered, you still get to leave with your life, and that's what's more valuable than that. So we're going to do contract A. We're going to see what happens. I'm ready to choose. We're going to do contract A. Neil signs his signature across the bottom of contract A. "No matter what happens to me, I have to live through this, even if it means not walking again. Whatever I need to do to see my family, I'll do. Somehow, some way, I'll make it work," said Neil. "Rarely in my line of work am I ever surprised. But this choice, I honestly wasn't expecting this for you, Mr. Berkman. Choosing to be paralyzed for the rest of your years? I guess somewhere deep down in that little horny, morbid soul of yours, you really do have a decent heart. For your sake, Neil, I hope this works out for you. I really do," replied Grim. Grim takes the last sip of his tea and gathers his contracts back inside the manila folder. "Well, Neil, I'd love to sit and chit-chat, but I've got a pretty booked day. It's been fun. It's been a fun talk, though, and I hope you live a long, fruitful life, Mr. Berkman. Best of luck to you." "Wait, how do I get back?" Grim snaps his finger, and the void flashes into a blinding white. Descending from the stratosphere, Neil returns to his astral form in a free fall. Neil could only watch as he was guided back to the world below, falling beneath the clouds. In a matter of seconds, he returned to the scene of the accident, seconds before the crash was set to happen. Looking down, he could see himself in a blue sedan fumbling his phone. On the other side of the road, moving full steam ahead, was an 18-wheeler set on a collision course that would forever change his life. Neil pushed away the droplets of rain as his astral body merged with his body. The merger sent a rippling shock down Neil's spine, bringing his attention back to the road. The inevitable was on its course, as the sedan was already in a swerving motion, moving toward the oncoming traffic. The near-death replay repeated its horrific song of deafening horn accompanied by headlights blaring through the front window. The grille of the 18-wheeler collided into the blue sedan. Its impact sent a thunderous crunching metal crack that tore through the sound of the rainfall. The metallic cracking would be the last sounds Neil would hear before blacking out from the horrific impact. Neil's eyes cracked open. Through them he saw unknown figures shaped in blurry silhouettes hovering over his body. His ears picked up their muffled voices, but he was unable to make sense of their words. He was alive but too weak to move, too weak to respond, and too weak to make sense of his surroundings. From muffled whisper to mumbles, the voices gradually rose in volume. A bright light shined down from above, triggering an irritating pounding inside his forehead. The tune of the voices became clearer, rising from mumbles to audible words. Neil, Neil, Miranda called to him. Too weak to move his arm, Neil raised his finger at the sound of his wife's voice. Don't move, Neil, don't move, she further instructed. Doctors and nurses shuffled in and out of the room. Some would talk to him, repeating Miranda's instructions to not move and to breathe slowly. Neil's two children, Josiah and Jaime, sat on the side of the room against the wall. The two children clenched each other's hands, watching their father hold on to their life by a thread. Neil watched as the nurses dispersed from the room, leaving him with just his family and head doctor. Neil, my name is Dr. Brennan, and I'm overseeing you for the next few days. Your body is extremely weak right now, so don't try and move or respond. All you need to do is listen. You were in a terrible accident. It's a miracle you're even breathing right now, but unfortunately the accident did some irreparable damage to the lower half of your body. I'm sorry, Mr. Berkman, but the accident left you paralyzed from the waist down. The remainder of the doctor's words drowned in a murmuring puddle dissolving into Neil's ears. During this moment, he recalled his previous conversation with Grimm and the agreement of the contract. He understood this was a fate of his own choosing, yet still, the words from the doctor shattered his reality and all that he knew. Neil would spend the next week lying in the same hospital bed, day in and day out. Each day passed no differently than the last, making his world feel smaller with every second. The same nurses, the same doctor, the same tests over and over. The mental weight of only being able to move at someone else's orders or with their assistance were heavy on his soul. After gradual improvement in cognitive function and overall well-being, Neil was granted leave from the hospital the following week. Adjusting to his new life proved to be more mentally taxing than he could have imagined. This forced Neil to take a leave of absence from work as he reconfigured his life from the ground up. The toll of his decisions carried the weight of an anvil on his mind. Over and over his inner voice reminded him of the missteps that led him here. No matter how hard he tried to push away those thoughts, they persistently intruded. Neil was a victim of his own doing. His life had been reduced to the culmination of his own decisions that he had yet to fess up to. Lingering scents from Saturday's morning breakfast traveled through the living room. From the couch, Neil watched Miranda wiping down the kitchen countertops while Josiah and Jaime played outside in the backyard. Neil's eyes would sometimes wander towards Miranda's meeting in a lock and step. During those moments, Miranda smiled, but he could only see Priscilla's face. He forced himself to smile back, hoping that it would mask his transgressions. Oh boy. Miranda took a seat next to him after cleaning the kitchen. She turned to Neil, placing her palm on his hand. We should go outside. You're looking a little pale. A bit of sunlight would do you some good, said Miranda. Neil nodded in agreement. It had been a few weeks since the sun touched Neil's skin. During this time home, he had only left to do his physical therapy treatments. Once home, he would spend the rest of the day finding menial tasks to complete to keep his mind occupied. Pushing himself up, using his upper body, Neil hopped into his wheelchair next to the couch. Miranda rolled him through the living room and out the back door patio where Josiah and Jaime were playing outside. He welcomed the sun's warmth on his skin and inhaled the fresh morning air. Miranda took a seat next to him on the patio chair where they sat and watched their children run around with the family Labrador. Miranda looked over to Neil, whose eyes looked straight ahead, but they weren't looking at anything. Not his children, not the yard, or the dog. They were just staring. Miranda, Neil mumbled, I deserve all of this. Everything that's happened to me. Miranda sat forward in her chair, hanging on to Neil's every word. He struggled to fight the well of tears spilling from his eyes. I haven't been faithful to you. I've lied. I've been a terrible husband and an even worse father. Miranda placed her hands over Neil's. He winced at the tightening of her grip around his hand. She met his weeping eyes with a deathly cold stare. I know, she replied. Ooh, kick him while he's down, Miranda. Damn. Neil froze in place. The words he wanted to speak stopped at the tip of his tongue, unable to leave his mouth. I've known for a while now. I was wondering how long it would take you to fess up. I was starting to think you never would. I guess it took almost dying to have you come to. I guess it took almost dying to have your come to Jesus moment. You really are a piece of shit. Ooh. Ooh. Damn. How did you know? Asked Neil. I'm not stupid, Neil. The late nights, the overtime hours, and when you get home you smell like cheap ass soap. It wasn't hard to see the signs. You don't remember the night of the accident because you blacked out, but I followed you. I followed you several times and you never noticed. I would sit across in the other parking lot sometimes, and every night the only cars I saw, aside from the security, were yours and hers. She'd always walk out first. Then you'd come out a few minutes after. You would always leave the little black bag that you threw in the trash. I went behind you one day and dug it out. A few times you would still leave the condom in there, you nasty bastard. And I know the route you take home, so I just take a faster one to get home first. It would look like I never left. Wow, she crafty. This is given Desperate Housewives. So you knew the whole time, but you didn't leave me. Why? Because she wants her money. I don't know. I don't know why she didn't leave. Don't mistake me for being here for meaning that I won't leave you, or that my foot isn't already out the damn door. I've been invisible to you ever since you started seeing her. But why leave when I've got the best seat for the show? I've watched you lie after lie after lie, and now because you're half the man you. Oh my god, that was. Ooh. And now that you're half the man you used to be, you roll around with that little puppy face all day long. Honestly, it's been fun to watch you suffer for a little bit. Damn, that's cold. Miranda's been harboring some hatred. Neil lowered his head, looking down into his lap. A tidal wave of shame washed over his face, but it drew no pity from Miranda. Let me ask you something, Neil. Has she checked up on you since the accident, given you a call, a text, maybe sent you a skimpy picture to try and resurrect some excitement down there for you? Neil swiped away the tears that fell onto his cheek. He shook his head side to side in response to Miranda's question. So what happens with us now? Asked Neil. The vibrating buzz of Miranda's phone paused their conversation. Hey, we're outside on the patio. You can come around the back and come get the kids. They're outside, said Miranda. Neil raised his head, looking past Miranda's shoulder where the open backyard gate was. In walked Miranda's mother, Audrey. Audrey was short and petite with long, overflowing gray hair. She always beamed with a smile as she walked along with her blue cane. Grandma's here. Now it's time for the real party, said Audrey. Josiah and Jaime turned their heads and ran towards Audrey the second they heard her voice. She squeezed her grandchildren tightly with a wide smile. Never empty-handed, Audrey gave the children a small bag of chocolate candy. She loved watching their faces light up as they unwrapped their many sugary delights. Neil rushed to wipe his face clear and straighten up his posture. He hadn't talked to his mother-in-law since he got back from the hospital and wasn't expecting her presence. Through his confusion, he still had to pretend he was happy to see her even under the dire circumstances. Walking side by side with Josiah and Jaime, Audrey approached the patio. Hey, you two. I was so happy when Miranda called me and asked me to watch the little ones for the week. I know you guys could really use the break right now, and I've been cooking all kinds of new recipes at the house. Somebody besides me has to eat 'em. But enough about me. How are you, Neil? Asked Audrey. Oh, boy. Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. Um, she called you? She called you? Of course, right after you got back home. She saw how hard it was for you and figured you two could use some time alone. And she's right. I know it's hard, but the mental recovery is just as important as anything else. If you don't take care of that, you'll end up crazy like me. I've said too much now. Let's go, little ones. We'll grab your bags and get you all packed up. I feel like this is going to turn into, now that the husband's already down for the count, the wife is just going to kill him. Probably not what's going to happen, but that's the sense I get. If she's already called grandma to take away the kids so that there's no witnesses. Neil kept his poker face in check as he hugged his two children. He squeezed both with all his heart, as if it would be the last time he'd see them. Neil watched hopelessly from the patio as they went inside to the house to get their bags. Please don't take the kids from me, whispered Neil. You don't get to make demands right now, Neil. You're lucky I haven't told them the truth about you yet. Don't push it. Now put on your face. We're going in to say goodbye, said Miranda. Miranda rolled Neil back into the living room where the children had gathered their suitcases and belongings. You two be good now. I'll be calling later to check in on you, okay? Said Miranda. Miranda hugged Josiah and Jaime, with Neil by her side in hidden distress. From the door, they watched their children load into Audrey's van before setting off down the street. Once out of view, Miranda swiftly turned Neil's wheelchair back into the house and placed him by the couch. What are you doing? Asked Neil. Miranda shot Neil down with a stare. He awaited a response, but his answer came in the form of thudding footsteps as Miranda headed upstairs. From his seat, he could hear rustling noises and items being shuffled around. When the noises stopped, Miranda returned downstairs carrying a suitcase and a small backpack. Where are you going? He asked. Miranda stood at the door with her back turned to Neil. She harshly exhaled. I've got a hotel that I'm going to go stay at for the rest of the week, because if I stay in this house for one more second, I might kill you. Watching you suffer has been fun, but right now I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you. I don't want to smell you. I don't even want to hear you breathe. So I'm going to go have some fun and try to enjoy my life, which is something I haven't been able to do in a while. And in case you're wondering, I've already filed the divorce papers and I'm pretty sure I'll end up with the sole custody of the kids. So, you can think about that while I'm gone. Don't call me. If you need anybody to talk to, call your children and tell them how much of a piece of shit you are. There's food in the fridge. If you need anything else, figure it out. Bye, Neil, said Miranda. Wow, she just straight up bounced. I don't blame her. The door slammed behind her, leaving Neil in an empty house only full of his thoughts. Each doubt and self-inflicted regret followed him to every room, sat with him during every meal, and watched him over as he slept. Neil would spend the week in a prison of isolation. Josiah and Jaime called throughout the week, shining the only semblance of light in his life at the moment. Any time they asked about Miranda, he would make an excuse as to why she was gone. Sidestepping the true elephant in the room, Neil led with his poker face when talking about his emotions to his children and Audrey. But the truth would be revealed the following week with Miranda's return. She revealed to the children and Audrey the plans for the divorce. She softened the explanation for Josiah and Jaime, but pulled no punches when explaining the situation to Audrey. Neil was cooperative and amicable through the divorce proceedings. The results of the divorce granted Miranda full custody of the children, as he lamented but expected. She would also keep the house, forcing Neil to find a small studio apartment on the other side of town. After the dust settled, Neil would have the dreadful heart-to-heart with his children that he had avoided for so long. His pleas of forgiveness bounced off cold shoulders, shattering into fragments as they hit the ground. The relationship between the family and Neil fractured as they became more distant with time. The children would visit Neil occasionally on holidays and his birthday, but he would spend much of his time alone trying to find the man he was when he first recited his wedding vows. Over the coming years, Neil would continue harboring emotions that he never reconciled with. The roots of his heart grew rotten, producing a pestilent soil that manifested physically through emotional outbursts and fits of self-destruction. Neil accepted his hellscape of reality until suicidal thoughts crept through the back door of his mind. Recognizing that he needed to help Neil check into his mental health facility. Let me reread that sentence. Recognizing that he needed help, Neil checked himself into a mental health facility. Free of judgment, it allowed him to deliver his thoughts coherently to someone who would listen with a helping ear. Through meaningful conversations came clarity, and through clarity came healing. After his successful stint at the facility, Neil chose to leave his job of 7 years to pursue a career in the mental health field. He transitioned into a role of mental health counselor in hopes that he could help anyone who traveled down the same tumultuous roads in his life as he did. After leaving his former job, Neil and Priscilla agreed to keep in contact with each other. The relationship shifted to a platonic phase where the two would have casual lunch outings from time to time just to check in with each other. In spite of their new phase, Neil kept Priscilla away from his family and was sure to never mention her name aloud around the children or Miranda. Miranda would remarry 2 years later after reconnecting with an old high school crush after years of lost contact. This would also be the same year that Josiah and Jaime were set to graduate from elementary school. With a new stable life, Miranda softened her stance toward Neil, inviting him to come see the children walk across the stage at their request. Okay, so we're having a little bit of reconciliation. Casual. Neil sat alongside Miranda, her new husband, cheering in elation as his two children walked across the stage. The good times rolled into post-graduation festivities as Josiah and Jaime's favorite pizza spot. This was the first time since his divorce that Neil genuinely laughed and truly bonded with his children. Time flies by the moments to be cherished the most. Before he knew it, Neil found himself back home in his studio apartment. Neil sat at his corner desk on his laptop scrolling through social media when a notification sounded on the screen. He clicked the notification, seeing that Miranda tagged him in a family photo they took together at the graduation. It was a picture full of hopeful grins that were pointing to a brighter days on the horizon. Staring at the picture, teary-eyed Neil cracked a smile. Because of his decisions, life would never fully return to what it was, but he can now accept it for what it is. He regained a portion of his life thought to be lost forever. Through his job, he found a new purpose and motivation to tackle each day. Most importantly, his children welcomed him back into their lives with open arms. Considering how worse things could have been, this was an outcome he was more than happy with. Inning A. Congratulations, you've reached one of the final innings, but there are more options to be explored. Return to the void and pick a different path next time. You might reach another branch of the story. Oh man, this has been really good. So I think there's just so I did. What if I don't choose? I did contract B and I did contract A. So I'm guessing the only other options are if you go back to where it's him and Miranda and you go through the option of telling her you no longer, or him and Priscilla, and you go through that way. So let's go do that and see what happens. Okay, so I'm gonna do this, and then I know that there's the other option where it says no, I can't do this anymore. Let's see what happens. No, I can't do this anymore. You say no, but I'm feeling something that says otherwise, said Priscilla. Her words tickled Neil's ear. Let's do I said no. Bailey, chill out. No, Priscilla, stop it, said Neil. Priscilla paused, her face stitching between several different expressions before settling on a smirk. Wow, Mr. Family Man finally grows a conscience, huh? I'm disappointed. I thought you'd be more fun. Just tell me one more thing. Was I better than her? Wow. What a bitch. Ooh. Let's do this one. No, you weren't, said Neil. It's almost honorable how much you still try and defend her even after I've made your toes curl for the last few months. Go ahead and live your little lie. I've had my fun and I know you've had yours. Don't worry about the working nights anymore. At least not with me anyway. Expect a schedule change next week. I'm not losing my job over you, so we should probably stay apart now. But if you become a real man again and you want to have some fun, you know how to reach me. Good night, Neil. Priscilla closed the door behind her, leaving Neil to sit in an uneasy silence. After shutting down his computer, Neil remained in his chair, listening to the harsh tap dance of the rain against the window. He released a deep inhale, running his hands across the stress folds of his forehead. Miranda would often check in on Neil throughout his workday, sometimes to flirt and other times to just simply check in. His trembling eyes moved along the words from the screen. Hey babe, how's work going? Are you gonna be out late again? Hold on a second. Not the know you were. Priscilla Savage, yeah, for real. Pause. My Jack Russell is in a chair on one of her plushy blankets, and one of the cats is trying to get in the chair with her, and she's like having a fit because she doesn't like to share her plushy blankets. Hey, calm down. They just want to lay with you. It's okay. You don't have to go all guard dog. There's plenty of soft, plushy blankets to lay on. Calm down. Animal. For real. Back to the story. Shit, Neil said to himself. His thumb hovered over the phone, shaking in an anxious fit. I'm on the way home now. I'll see you soon. I love you, Miranda. Neil tucked the phone back in his pocket, heading out of the office building. The cloud of shame hovering over him continued to follow him outside underneath a torrential downpour of rain. Neil's blue sedan was last remaining in the lot. He hopped in his car to the sound of the FM sports talk radio. The hot takes spewing from the show host weren't enough to quiet the voices in his head as he continued to wrestle with. So he allowed himself to sit with those thoughts as he peeled off into the city streets. And then this is just simply the same from what it was before. And then we meet Grim again, right? You've only got one more main ending in this one to get. Yeah, I thought so. Because this looks like it leads me back to where we go to the contracts, right? So, would the other ending be under where he asked Miranda for help? Because I've already gone through all of these. I'm assuming that's where it's at. I'm gonna restart again. So we get to the part where he's like messed up like his spreadsheet or whatever, right? The other ending is don't choose, then go to the waiting room again. Oh. I thought I did that one though. Did I not? Maybe I didn't. Priscilla perked up at her desk, eagerly waiting Neil's answer. I messed up and I need help. Never thought you'd ask. This is what I'm here for, replied Priscilla. Priscilla strutted to Neil's desk with the glimmer of a smile flashing underneath her lips. Fridays in the office allowed for casual wear, making the shape of her body more visible. She approached Neil in her tight blue jeans and a white short-sleeved three-button shirt. It was a simple look, but it but the fit hugged against each line and curve of her athletic figure. She leaned over Neil's shoulder, placing one hand on top of his as she guided the mouse, positioning her press in Neil's direct line of sight. Priscilla loosened the buttons on her shirt. She smiled, watching Neil restrain himself from taking obvious glances. You know it's okay if you look. Let's not act like you haven't done this before, said Priscilla. You had two choices in the waiting room. Okay, I'll have to see when I get back there. With just a few clicks, she fixed Neil's mistake in the spreadsheet. Priscilla's hand traveled from the mouse to Neil's face, rubbing against it, forcing Neil to give her his full attention. Let's stop wasting time. You know what I want, and I know what you need. Tell me what you need, Neil. She persisted. I'm gonna do this. Stop it. You always play hard to get, like you're not gonna give me what we both want. I said no. I said no. Wow, okay, so this just brings us back to where we already read. Okay, so everything kind of joins eventually. BRB, gonna go make a sandwich. Ooh, a sandwich! Okay, so we read this already. Go back to the waiting room. Your choices. It's time for the fun part. I thought you'd never ask or reply. Contract A, Contract B. What if I don't choose? So I can still hear. Okay. I'm drawing a blank on what you mean by the waiting room. Because I did contract A, where he's paralyzed. That's the one we just did. And I did contract B, where he goes to hell in the end. I did the what if you don't choose. I'm going to do I choose neither. I think it's this one. This is where we have the out of body experience going back to our bodies where the crash still happens. Weird, isn't it? Seeing yourself pass to the other side. Okay, so here we are. Waiting room. What am I waiting for? Under normal circumstances, you'll be waiting to be judged, but your situation is a little bit different. Okay, so here we go. Option A. Your soul will be judged according to how you lived your life up to this point. Simply put, if the good outweighs the bad, you can pass through the pearly gates, but if it doesn't, then it's straight into the fire with you. Okay, and then... Okay, so, okay, I remember where I'm at now. So I did option B last time. So I need you option A. Ready to choose. Wait to be judged. I got here by letting the chips fall where they may. No need in changing now. What's meant to happen will happen. I'll wait for the almighty judge, said Neil. Continuing the streak of boldness I see, you've got consistency, I'll give you that. In that case, let me give you a quick rundown of how this works. You will sit in this room until you hear your name called across the loudspeaker. Once they call you, just walk out and up the hallway and follow the signs to reception. Don't worry, there aren't many hallways here, so you won't get lost. In the meantime, you can cut on that TV to keep yourself entertained, said Grim. Does the afterlife have good cable? Asked Neil. Oh, we've got something much better than cable. That TV is only limited by your imagination. It'll show you anything you've ever wanted to know. All you have to do is ask and it shall be done. For example, if you want to know what Miranda's been doing since your death, just ask it and it'll show you how the rest of her life is going to pan out. Just wait until I leave you before you cut it on. Even in the afterlife, we've got certain privacy restrictions to adhere to. Any other questions? Neil held the television controller in his hand, examining it from every angle. It took a plain black controller with only power, forward, rewind, stop, and pause buttons. No, I don't think so, and if I think of one, I'll just ask the TV. I might like the answers better than coming from this. I might like the answers better coming from this, he replied. You're a funny guy, Neil. Glad we got to chat one more time. If you're lucky, this will be the last time we see each other, because if you see me again, you won't like where you are going. I'll leave you, Mr. Berkman. I've got plenty more souls to collect and afterlife orientations to give. May God show mercy on that little soul of yours, Mr. Berkman. Neil sat in silence as Grim closed the door behind him. He turned his attention back to the television from his finger hovering over the power button. He inhaled a deep breath before pressing down. The screen remained black, but its outer brim glowed in fluorescent white. If the television truly could answer anything, Neil had a series of questions on his mind. What happened to Miranda after I died? How did Josiah and Jaime turn out? What happened to Priscilla? What happened to Priscilla? No one cares what happened to Priscilla. Um, let's let's see. How did Josiah and Jaime turn out? The humming noise returned as the pixels rearranged themselves to form a new image. The screen displayed a sequence of graduation ceremonies, each entitled in a way that dissolved into the next. From elementary school through his high school, Josiah and Jaime walked across each stage, growing noticeably taller with each dissolving cut of the video. Gleeful cheers erupted from Miranda and Audrey in the crowd during each walk. As the children had grown in height, Miranda and Audrey were progressing in age. The final video showed Josiah and Jaime now as full-grown adults. They walked the stage to their college graduation, each placed on the dean's list and receiving their bachelor's degree. Neil joined the celebration, clapping at the sight of his children's crowning accomplishments. The camera panned to the crowd, showing a chill for Miranda, but Audrey was absent from the celebration. Next to Miranda stood a burly, bearded figure hovering well over 6 feet tall. He looked down at Miranda, clapping in unison. She looked up at the burly figure, leaning in for a tight hug. Neil observed these obvious affection, connecting the dots when he noticed the rings on each fingers. Neil paused the television, stirring in a rush of emotions that sunk into his chest. Miranda moving on to the next phase of her life was inevitable. Even through his wrongs, Neil's ego wrapped itself in a jealous coating. If this television truly could answer anything, Neil had a series of questions on his mind. I thought I was gonna make a peanut and jelly sandwich, but have no peanut butter. Oh, that's not good. That's no bueno. What happened to Miranda after I died? A low hum buzzed from the TV. The hum faded as individual pixels formed across the screen, showing an image of Miranda. The clarity of the screen was filtered in a dreamlike, hyper-realistic radiance. The audio filled the room with a rich and natural crispness. Neil could almost feel himself standing next to Miranda while he sat watching on the couch. Neil watched Miranda crying as the doctors comforted her upon his death. The scene switched to Miranda walking into the house where Josiah and Jaime sat on the living room couch. She took a second to gather herself before explaining to the children that Neil had passed. Neil cried along with the family, watching as they collectively broke down in tears. Gloom hovered over the household as an impending cloud waiting to storm at any moment's notice. That feeling would carry them to the funeral that was held the following week, where his entire family would be present. I butchered that whole sentence. I apologize. A peculiar feeling it was to watch his own deceased body in an open casket be looked over by his family and friends. He watched as families from days and past relatives recounted some of their favorite moments spent with him during this time. Loyalty and honesty were consistent themes throughout his speech. While it was reassuring to be remembered in a positive light, the words left unspoken stood out the most. Miranda spoke faintly when approached back with condolences. Her black shades masked the agony and unrelenting flow of tears. She wouldn't take to the podium and share any fond memories, words, or moments of Neil. When the funeral ended, she gathered up the children along with her mother Audrey and promptly returned back home. Audrey did her best to keep the children entertained while Miranda sat in her bedroom to have a moment to herself. The television screen transitioned to a first-person perspective of Miranda as she took a seat at her desk and cracked open her laptop. A beachfront honeymoon photo of the two lit up this home screen wallpaper. Dozens of folders and miscellaneous files were scattered about the home screen. However, an unnamed folder was placed alone in a lower right-hand corner. Miranda clicked the folder that contained images and videos. The first image she clicked that was time-stamped dating back 2 months before his accident and showed him and Priscilla leaving the office together after an overtime shift. Her hair was still frizzled from the encounter. The preceding picture showed the two leaving the office always 2 to 3 minutes after each other. Miranda scrolled down to the last file in the folder. A video played showing the camera capturing a front door of Neil's office building. Presumably the camera was zoomed in from a separate parking lot in the business park. The video showed Neil exiting the office with a black plastic bag that he discarded in the trash can. When Neil left, Miranda exited her car to retrieve the bag. Wearing a glove, Miranda found the bag and shuffled around its contents. Most notably, she found a wash rag and a used condom. Miranda slammed her hand down on the keyboard, stopping the video. In a fit of seething rage, she deleted the folder, slamming the laptop shut. Neil paused the television, dropping his head. She knew. She knew this whole time. Shit, he said to himself. If this television could truly answer anything, Neil had a series of questions on his mind. A jelly sandwich. I don't care what happened to Priscilla, but we'll ask what happened to Priscilla. The pixels rearranged themselves, showing Priscilla sitting in the office on a late evening by herself. She walked over to Neil's vacant desk, packing the personal belongings that decorated his workspace into a white box. She picked up the picture of Neil and Miranda, placing it face down on top of the pile. The screen cut to Priscilla sitting in a small room speaking to her manager in a one-on-one meeting. She sat forward, assertively in her demeanor. Priscilla informed him that after 7 years with the company, she would be leaving to pursue her own personal business ventures. Priscilla walked to the entrance of the building, sliding the white box across the desk to the security officer. As her parting favor, she requested that the box be mailed out to Neil's family as soon as the soonest convenience. Okay, well, cool. I still don't like her. Let's go to our final judgment. Neil Berkman, said a voice from the loudspeaker. Neil's heart dropped into his stomach at the calling of his name. He stepped into the clean marble floors of the hallway. Neil pushed his sweaty palms to the bottoms of his pockets as he walked toward the reception area as he had been instructed. Before him stood a golden podium raised high above on a platform. A man draped in a matte white robe looked down from the podium stand to Neil. All right, Neil, my name is Jonathan, and I'll be your sole arbiter today. If you could, I need you to look right up at me, eye to eye. I know it sounds a little awkward, but that's kind of how this works, said Jonathan. Neil looked up to get a better look at Jonathan, who stared back at him with a golden light emitting from his pupils. Jonathan's eyes locked up on Neil's, leaving him paralyzed and unable to speak. Jonathan scanned Neil up and down 2 times before his eyes returned to normal and the hold was released. Caught off guard, the paralysis Neil pushed out a quick breath. What happened? Asked Neil. You were judged. That's how this process works. Sorry, I should have told you beforehand, replied Jonathan. So, how'd I do? You're an interesting one, Neil. Didn't end your life on the best of notes with the whole cheating thing. You've done your fair share of dirt recently, and I see you had a run-in with Grim. Those get ugly for most people. You had the choice to escape the accident injury free, but didn't want to forfeit the potential of a pleasant afterlife. Or maybe you just hated Grim and you did it out of spite. Either way, wise choice, Mr. Berkman. Current mistakes don't define a person's entire life. Overall, the scales tip in your favor. You're fine. You get to run along with the good kids. Now take the door to the right. So that's it? I'm good? Yes, you're good. You guys always think this is going to be way more dramatic than it actually is. We've got millions of souls to process here, so we need to be efficient. Can't have this taking up too much time, even though we have an eternity. That's beside the point. Yeah, you're right, I guess. Thanks, Jonathan, Neil replied. Neil approached the door on the right, placing his hand on the knob. Oh, one more thing, Mr. Berkman. Just between me and you, if you notice the absence of your mother-in-law Audrey in one of your tapes, don't worry. She's doing fine. Audrey drank a few cups of apple juice before the graduation, made her stomach hit a bat flip or two, so she couldn't make it to the ceremony. But other than that, she's doing great. Neil chuckled to himself as he turned to the door handle, pushing it open. Good to know, Jonathan. Good to know. Ending C. Congratulations, you've reached one of the endings. There are 3 additional endings to reach if you choose to do so. Revisit the void for an alternate path or take a different choice once you've reached the afterlife. Hooray! We did it! We've gotten all 4 of the endings. And, I am presently surprised. That was very well written and very well done. Round of applause for Serial Sensei, everybody. They have really outdone themselves. I've really enjoyed it. It's very well written. So, congrats to you on your accomplishments and getting this out there for people to read and interact with. It's a great story. I love the whole like choose your own adventure type thing in video games and reading things like that. So thank you again for sharing this with us and putting your work out there. I love it. Um, well, that was Conundrum Collection by Michael Williams, aka Serial Sensei, over here at Athena Alliance. Thank you guys again for hanging out and listening to me read. That was a lot of reading. Um, so I'm going to need to drink like a lot of water when I get off stream. But it was great. I really enjoyed it. Very well written. It paints a picture, very detailed. Um, Great characters, and like it was just amazing. So thank you again for sharing that. I will hydrate. I've been trying to hydrate this whole time. Got my big cup here. But I don't usually like read like out loud like that. So I was like, having to keep taking sips. But yeah, that was amazing. I loved it. Second story was even harder to write than this one, but I'm glad you enjoyed. Thank you. Well, I think I have the is that the hoodie one? I have that one too. I think they're bundled together, right? Um, but if you are interested in getting this as well, you can find this over on, is it Itch.io or itch.io? I'm not really sure how you say it. I've visited that site a few times. Um, but feel free to head over and check that out and support Serial Sensei in their endeavors. Highly recommend. Um, yeah, it was amazing. So, itch.io. I love how you spelled it. Love it. But thank you again for joining me over here on the Athena Alliance channel. We appreciate you hanging out and watching us read this amazing story and go through the different options you have. We are just glad you're here. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your weekend. My name is Anne, aka the Goddess of Kills, over here on Athena Alliance, and we are just glad you're here. So thank you guys again. Thank you, Serial Sensei, again for sharing your work. Thank you, Athena, for being here and letting me stream on the platform. Love you all. And um, if we have anyone that we want to raid out, let's go ahead and get that worked on, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your night. Relax this weekend, drink some water. If you don't work Monday, then good on you. Relax and hang out. And oh, thank you. Um, but yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out, and continue creating Serial Sensei. Can't wait to see any more work that you decide to do. Getting snow this weekend, so looking forward to it. Oh, nice. I wish it would snow here just a little bit, because I would love for my Jack Russell and my Aussie Shepherd to see snow. I want to see how they react to it. Um, my pug has seen snow and he's just like, eh, my paws are wet. I hate it. But I would love to see their reaction. So, all right. Well, we're going to rate out, guys. Thank you again for hanging out. We'll see you guys next time. Have a wonderful weekend.